And then they'll only give the license to factories for this. I mean, so they'll sub-license it to the Chinese, the Indians, the Mexicans, sub-companies in the United States and Europe, knowing they went and found it, then wrote white papers on it. We've written articles about this. Then they deploy it, and then now decades later, French news agency, Chemical and Plastic Containers makes male mice act like females. And then they had George Soros-funded groups come out last year, literally hundreds of articles over a month period, thinking it would hurt me, taking out of context what I said, saying juice boxes are making you gay. Well, no, I was reading studies on air that it's causing hermaphrodite developments in fetal brains of mammals. Not just the genitals, but in the brain. And that's what's causing sexual confusion. And that's, and it's not, again, coldly. It's not an issue of your identity. And they do this to you, and then they have a media system that says it's your identity. Everybody needs to be nice to people. Well, absolutely. People should be nice to you, but and the religious folks shouldn't even be attacking people, because separately from even a religious debate, this has been done to you. This has been done to you. And then you'll watch the George Soros crowds, the chemical engineer promoters. They'll come out and attack this again because I'm here telling you. I mean, is it homophobic to say that these mice had this done to them? No, it's a scientific discussion of how to create infertility and to stop the males and females merging and producing more offspring for a global program of depopulation that your choice has been taken away from you, and this has been done because it affects the brain, it affects the different endocrine systems, it affects the genitals, to the point of that all over the world, in some major studies, upwards of half of the fish and frogs and other amphibians, including reptiles like snakes, have both sexual organs. It's so pronounced, just what's going into the water as runoff in the embryonic development in the eggs of the fish and the frogs, that this is happening. Now, mammals are bigger and tougher, but and their study, this was all done, okay? And the point is, if this has been done to you and you like it, that's because that's now your chemical physiology. You've been re-engineered. I'm not making a moral statement on it. Get past the mind control. I'm saying to you, do you understand that this is a public plan and has been done? Male mice who were exposed as babies to BPA, a chemical common in canned foods and plastic containers, it lines the tin cans, everything, act more like females and are seen as less desirable mates, a U.S. study shows Monday. The findings should have implications on how BPA and Bisphenol A may affect human development and behavior, and the study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. That is the most prestigious. The BPA-exposed deer mice in the study look normal, but there's nothing obviously wrong with them, yet they are clearly different, said the lead author at the University of Missouri. Females do not want the mate BPA-exposed male because they're giving off different pheromones. They're giving off a female pheromone. And BPA-exposed males perform worse on spatial navigation tasks. It also stunts you. Development. You go to a restaurant, most of the boys now just look like mutant, brain-damaged people. I mean, I'm sorry. It's just, it's hardcore. The girls are hyper-female. They're growing taller. Their growth hormone, they're having really a form of subacromegalia. And that's why the women, there's a quadrupling now in breast cancer in the last 20 years? Oh yeah, let's just forget the whole obsession over, men suddenly, everywhere, and it is happening, and the media then saying it's good, do it. You should know you're being chemically programmed. I'm not making a judgment about... because that's a distraction, okay? You understand, this is being done to you. Now let's get off the sex stuff, because everybody gets obsessed with that. This also increases cancer in males, and there's literally thousands of these studies going back to the 20s and 30s, and current ones, hundreds of current ones. Women, they're not going to tell you why you get that breast tumor, and why they then fry you with radiation and bug poison, known as chemo, and suck all the money out of you, and then you'll die, and you'll be put in a box. So let's get off the sex stuff now, because, you know, the Soros will still twist that, and that's fine, because people will actually find the truth. You need to know, women, that the males are feminized. You are hyper-feminized. That's why puberty was 13, 14. Now, on average, it's 10 in the West, everywhere where this is done. And now some girls as young as 3, tens of thousands, now by age 5 are going into puberty. You're hyper-aging as well. And the tissues that are affected more by this hyper-age, so you have the breast of a 95-year-old woman at 30. They've killed you, just like the TSA agents. I'm sorry, they soft-killed most of us. This is People ask, why aren't Europeans, why aren't Americans having children? Why does Europe have a 1.3 replacement rate? You know, your granddaddy and grandma had your mom, your dad. They go out, they have children. They go out and meet people, marry them. Why aren't people having children? Why is fertility way down? Why is cancer off the chart? Why is diabetes off the chart? Why are men looking more feminine, behaving in feminine ways, not acting the way males have always behaved? In Europe, they're passing laws where you're not allowed to call boys boys at school. They're not allowing gender. It's because, and this is in the globalist documents, and Aldous Huxley wrote about this in his nonfiction books. His brother headed up the program at the UN, at UNESCO, Julian Huxley, that they would create a hermaphrodite drone that didn't even breed. I mean, look, truth is stranger than fiction. I just unplugged my headset here. Let me get it. And so I had all this other news to cover, and I'll get into what happened with the TSA here in Texas. But here is the article by Paul Joseph Watson, Cancer Surges and Body Scanner Operators. TSA launches cover-up, and they've finally been forced to release some of the NIST documents, but they've blacked out the radiation meter levels. Continuing, they also have measurements of the type of radiation leaking outside of the containment facility, but then they spin it and say, but we say that's safe. But then all the other independent studies say it's not safe, and now we have reports of higher cancer rates, and that the TSA is extremely concerned about all of this. Fearful of provoking further public resistance to naked airport body scanners, the TSA has been caught covering up a surge of cases in TSA workers developing cancer as a result of their close proximity to radiation-firing devices. And again, this is classic lawyer speak. In the document I scanned over earlier, NIST blacks out the numbers because they don't want other engineers ever seeing it and going, that's deadly. They block out the numbers. Then they say, oh, this is safe, but we did measure these numbers outside of the machine splattering. It's like the TSA saying, we didn't make that 95-year-old take her diaper off. We just said you can't fly if you don't. See, it's all these lawyer tricks. Perhaps the most shocking revelation to emerge from the latest Freedom of Information Act documents obtained by the Electronic Privacy Information Center. After union representatives at Boston discovered a cancer cluster amongst TSA workers linked with radiation from body scanners, the TSA sought to downplay the matter and refused to issue employees with dosimeters to measure levels of exposure. Now let's stop right there. It is federal and state law. I know, my dad's a dentist. But anybody that's been in a hospital or anywhere around x-ray machines, you know on record that there's a radiation officer. They have to wear the badge. They have to have groups come in every month, check the calibration of the machines, because they get off very often and will fry you. And you've heard about MRIs being calibrated wrong and people's hair falling out and getting cancer. They're so strong. So it's a serious issue, and that's what these are lower intensity MRIs, really. And so they're covering all this up, and it turns out for years, knowing about the cancer clusters. And finally, the TSA are waking up and getting concerned. The problem is the smarter ones will just quit, and they'll hire even more crazy goons. And so they refuse to set up the proper radiation monitoring. Of course, they could be like the EPA now. When radiation went up in the U.S. from Fukushima, they just raised the levels of what they say is safe, more gains. The documents indicate how a large number of workers have been falling victim to cancer, strokes, and heart disease. The department, rather than acting on it, or explaining its position, seems to have just dismissed it, and it just goes on as it breaks down. This article is so huge. We'll get more into the chemical assault on humanity when we get back. But this is just such incredible news. Speaking of radiation, cancer surges in body scanner operators. TSA launches cover-up. The union, according to Watson's article, and he's got links to some others, reports that they've had big increases in cancer, one of the first airports many years ago to test the scanners out, and that they are charging there's been a cover-up. Also coming to a store near you, radioactive fish. That's up on Infowars.com. They're reporting all over the news that Fukushima is continuing to dump massive amounts of radiation into the Pacific Ocean. And it's now been confirmed that part of the nuclear power plant has been flooded here in the United States, in Nebraska. And there's a headline, what the Fukushima is going on in Omaha. That's from Local Talk News. With the history of government cover-ups, we don't know what the truth is. We know that there was a disaster right around a few days after Fukushima started months and months ago up in an area of Canada, and they released a bunch of radioactive waste into the lake and said, don't worry about it. And radiation levels have gone up, and the media has been told by the government, hey, we're just raising what we say is safe. You know, being shot in the head with a .357 Magnum would probably kill you, at least hurt you. But if the government just said, hey, .357 Magnum rounds fired into your head at point-blank range no longer hurt you, would that suspend the laws of physics and nature? No, they wouldn't do that. Now, I meant to come into the show today and get into this incredible report. And again, there are thousands of studies all over the world going back 80, 90 years dealing with plastics. And that they are oils. They're oil-based, and many of the drugs that Big Pharma has made are petrochemical-based because they can manipulate it. And that the bisphenol A that's been adopted in most plastics, the liners of tin cans, plastic juice boxes, you know, all of it, even the paper ones have that lining. It's how the paper doesn't get soggy, doesn't break through. Normal paper box would, that it leaches estrogen mimickers, and it also causes endocrine disruptions, overall disruptions, and we covered that report. And of course, literally hundreds of these. If you just type in hermaphrodite frogs, hermaphrodite fish, sterile frogs, I've seen studies with upwards of half of them in the southern Mississippi now being sterile or having both sexes. And it's also changing the brains of the frogs. Now, the globalists would spin this as a human right. The frogs have a right for us to dump us in the water and make them hermaphrodites or make them confused. See, it's a scientific issue, but they would say, you're being a hermaphrodite frogophobe. And I'm like, what does this have to do with people's sexual preference? I'm saying they're choosing it for you, and that it's not like a preference. They have biologically altered who you are, and that's been the plan all along. And we cover it in the in-game extras, the university documents where they talked about doing this. And now we got Holder and all the others. This is what they've done. And they're keeping it in the plastics. They're keeping it in everything. They're doing it and they don't care. And they're not going to stop. You have to stop eating and drinking out of what they're doing. And then you've got the GMO crops. Every major GMO crop in every major, even internal study, has the, quote, side effect. It's the real effect. It's the perfect place to hide it in that genome that's so complex that only the genetic engineers who are inducted into this Malthusian eugenic school at the major universities, and then if they buy into it, they get the grants, they get the jobs, they then know what they're doing. Of course, they're all obsessed with organic food because they know what they're doing to everybody else. It's a cult. Ask yourselves, what are you doing in this time of great challenge? What are you doing to unlock minds?